IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Welcome back to Think Fast, or welcome to Think Fast. Where are we back? Are we still here? Where were we? Where have you been? Suchita, we switched places, cities rather, last week. You came to the Bay when I came to the Delhi, so we still have not met, guys. We have known each other for years, still not met.
Yes.
We're switching cities.
Oh my God.
Yes, one day it will happen.
Ek din. But speaking of Ek Din, it's been an interesting week. I don't think there's been massive news, but there's been interesting news there. I have seen the toaster that Delhi is, and Suchita has seen the weird mess that Bombay is.
That Bombay is. Seriously, man. I couldn't wrap my head around what Amit was saying in our episode, but it's every time you land in Bombay, you're just what
Chaos.
has happened to this lovely city? How have you not kicked off with how can she slap? How can she slap? Will Smith? Chris Rock?
So I have this very weird story about it, is that I was, getting on my flight to come to Delhi when this whole slap thing happened. I actually saw him do the initial part, not him shouting at Chris Rock. So I thought it's one of those gags and I just moved on. Yeah. And I landed and what is going on with the internet? Why are they obsessing over a stupid gag? I realized it wasn't a gag.
Yep.
But I have spent a lot of time thinking about how he's really going to use this to build his narrative for the next decade, which is exactly
Will Smith or Chris Rock?
Will Smith. Chris Rock this is going to be a minor spike for Chris Rock. Will Smith will use this to build his narrative for the next decade. Watch and learn.
He is such a loser. You felt bad because I've seen King Richards and his performance is impeccable. So ladies and gents, keeping the slap aside, watch that movie. It's fantastic. Class act performance. But I think after all of that to, ruin stuff for yourself by acting so impulsively on a pretty lame joke. You know what I mean? It was such an insipid comment. It was
Have you read his book?
He's resigned. I've been listening to it on Audible.
So if you go through his book, you realize that, and I won't spoil it for you, but if you go through how he thinks of himself, and also beyond that, how he really, I think he's very messed in the head. But I think what he's used to kind of come out of that mess is to say that I'll be blatantly honest about everything. This is that backfiring exactly. There was a YouTube series he did before his book came out called The Fittest in My Life, or The Fittest Version, or something like that, where he was supposed to get fit before his, before his, book came out. And he was writing the book at the same time. That entire series is him having an emotional breakdown throughout the show. So that's become his thing. He's been spiraling for a while, and I think this is one of those end points of the spiral.
End of the spiral. Yeah. No, but he's resigned from the academy, and for what it's worth, Chris Rock's shows are packed. He performed in Boston, I think 2 days after the slap, and his show was packed with a full audience. I think what's really nice to see is I think people were generally shocked when that thappad happened, but it's nice to see how so many people, Jim Carrey included, have rallied up in Chris Rock support. But yeah, it was kind of weird because that they just continued to carry on with the ceremony pretending nothing's happened reminded me of a big Indian joint family, just a very weird events. But let's not get too distracted by how can she slap. We've got a couple of startup news points to cover. You know about Games 24/7, so preach, Varun, preach, tell us.
So Games 24/7's been around for a while, right? I think 2005, 2006 is when they started off. They've been one of those gaming platforms who went towards the casual gaming side of things and really kind of built on that. Now the problem with casual gaming is it's great to kind of build stability because you can have a few things and people kind of come in and snack out. But you're never going to scale some of the larger gaming players, let's say your Router, etc., or from a streaming end, or a Dream 11, which went really focused went into. They finally turned unicorn. It's been a while, but they finally turned unicorn. They have a couple of sub-platforms like your My 11 Circle and Rummy Circle, which again, I think is the problem, right? You're doing two ends of it. If you go deep in one focus, I've realized in gaming, at least when I look at it from a broader perspective, it might actually be better. But that unicorn, good for them. What do you think of Games 24/7? Have you played any games on
them 24/7?
Nope, I haven't played any games, period, though I'm warming up to like using the Oculus to have a little bit of fun. But but Games 27 really seems to have morphed into like a house of brands of games of sorts, which makes sense because your biggest, game creators in the world do exactly that. So it almost seems like it's a product play, not really a platform play. But again, with knowing absolutely nothing about Games 24/7, congratulations to you. No one really cares about unicorns anymore, given that there are bigger things to worry about. Speaking of
what is
which,
the term for a bigger unicorn? A decacorn. Was that the word?
Decacorn. Oh my God, a chipkali is what we will call it. But switching over, and the reason why no one cares about unicorns, decacorns, or chipkalis is because the Indian startup IPOs have been a total disaster for the past couple of months, and the disaster will continue. So everyone from the likes of Delivery to Farm Easy to Oyo Hotels, Urban Company, all of them were sort of slated to list, in this quarter or basically at some point in this year. But everyone seems to really be pulling back their plans given how like tepid the markets are currently.
You called it winter's coming.
Yep. Oyo Hotels and Homes, which is yet to get SEBI's nod for its IPO, has postponed its plans and is likely to reduce issue size as well, which I would highly, highly, highly recommend given the amount of scrutiny that they have been under. I think Ashish Mishra of the Morning Context will single-handedly ensure that they don't IPO.
When they make a series about Oyo, like how there's been a series on WeWork, I'm not saying Oyo will go the direction of WeWork, but I'm sure there's a character playing Scott Galloway in that show. You're going to have a character playing Ashish Mishra here.
Exactly. Scott Galloway with hair. But I think those have been the two larger pieces. Of course, startups continue to raise money. Life goes on. People get slapped. But we've got an interesting episode coming up. What are you talking to us about today, V to the D?
But before that, I have to let you know that while in the past, there have been certain things said about me and Mr. Ankur Warikoo, me and Mr. Ankur Warikoo had an amazing conversation on my other podcast, which is Take a Pause. It's really fun. It's out there. So Jalasmi messaged me saying, "Oh, you're chatting with Ankur now on a podcast." I'm like, Jalasmi, see, he's my friend. I talked to him. We had lots of fun.
Okay, guys, now that Varun has plugged in his book, his podcast, and his never-ending conversations, producer Jalasmi, can you, release a little behind-the-scene clips of the conversation that Varun and I had? Dekh li teri dosti, bhai. Dekh li teri dosti. Let me send some of those to Ankur Warikoo and get his reaction.
I only send
But before I throw Varun under the bus, ladies and gents, we guys are going to quickly he's blushing now. He's blushing. Varun knows he's been caught. Damn.
Always been blushing. I have a nice pink face. Lovely.
Acha, okay. Now you're obsessing over yourself. I don't even know what to say.
You know that when I'm on live stream, I'm never looking at the other window. I look at my own face all the time and talk. You know that? No, that's like how I talk.
Yes, of course. Aapki shakal pe likha hai. Aap thode se narcissistic ho. But kuch nahi hota, kuch nahi hota.
Self-admirer. But before I get into that mode, you're talking about the New York Times and what everyone can learn from their story. I'm digging into the Axis Citibank one. What people don't know is I actually love learning about the banking sector and the finance sector. It's something which I like to learn about. I'm not an expert, but I find it fun, especially the random stuff that happens there. You're then tapping into PVR and Inox, but I have a story to tell about that, which nobody will expect. And you were obsessed about the Omega Swatch. Did you try to buy the Omega Swatch one from somebody?
No, because I don't live in the UK or wherever it was available. But there have been a bunch of really cool collabs, which we'll cover today.
Yes. And we're going to close it off with Reliance again. Reliance and fashion are again in the news. So we'll talk about that. And that's what we have ahead on Think Fast this week. We've gone slow with the introduction, but we're going to go faster as we go along. So, but before we do that, we'll take a break and be right back with Pinky Me and blue background stuff.
You're the people pleaser, right? Oh, yes. Or then desperately seeking the one? Oh, wait, you're the one who doesn't think they're ever good enough. Oh. So much drama. And for what? Is it doing you any good? Listen to me. I'm Chetna, your favorite positive action coach. Yes, I'm the one who has been dropping all those truth bombs on every episode. Oh, no. And it's time you learn to say no to drama. That's also what my podcast is called. And a new episode is out every Monday and Wednesday on the IBM Podcast app, website, as well as all major podcasting platforms.
Welcome back to Think Fast. We are talking about Times, the New York Times. What do we have to say about the New York Times, Suchita?
What we have to say about the New York Times is that they don't sound like you do. They, are slightly more serious, efficient, and not as
Wordle owners.
Wordle owners, yes, Wordle owners. So, guys, what we're going to kick off with is New York Times, which, keeping my bias as a reader and consumer of New York Times aside, I think they've done a crack job of really pivoting into a digital first sort of play, right? So there's this excellent podcast that I want to give a shout out to. It's called Business Breakdowns, and there's an episode called Empire Strikes Back, which is essentially a conversation in between Jesse Pooji, the host of the podcast, and Alex Lieberman, who is the co-founder of Morning Brew, and they basically break down the New York Times' model, right? So we're going to borrow a little bit from there, but I'll just kick off with setting some context. New York Times, really started as a publisher, right? And unlike a lot of print newspapers and print publications, they've somehow managed to really make the pivot into digital fairly well. And I think the thing that makes New York Times extremely interesting is, they've taken the concept of 360-degree marketing by its horns. So if you look at the past couple of years, they've gone deep into podcasting. They've got, deep into even their newsletters, where now they have, multiple category-wise newsletters. They've almost kind of created the playbook for what a new age news platform needs to look like. And I think the most excellent thing about New York Times is its customer acquisition, quote unquote, maybe through reporting, but the way they're able to actually upsell and retain their consumers has been through this array of additional, categories. So for example, cooking on the New York Times is huge. Obviously they acquired Wordle recently, and New York Times' games have always been, big.
The crossword, yeah.
Exactly. And of note, their more recent acquisitions have obviously been things like The Athletic, Boston Globe, Wirecutter, which they acquired a while ago, but absolutely excellent destination to get curated recommendations for all things largely in the electronics, consumer durables sort of space. Varun, any words of praise for NY Times?
I think they almost set the template which everyone needs to look at and build on, right? Is that everybody always believed that deep reporting and more very focused, I wouldn't even call it niche, I would say just focused content would not be the future, that everybody had to go wide, everybody had to go general in that sense, right? BuzzFeed kind of fell into that trap as well, if you look at it, when they've been struggling. If you actually go deep, and if there's something that people pay for stuff that's deeper, they might not pay for something that's very over the top or breaking news. It's pretty much breaking everywhere anyway, so it's not like it's a individual break. Anda har jagah phat raha hai.
Yeah.
Wow, our Hindi is amazing. Look at that South Indian Hindi coming out right now.
Congratulations.
But I think that's the thing, right? You need to look at what they've done and really understand how you kind of build premium offerings and also have different voices. It's not like one singular voice. And the fact that people like Karas Fisher and
Ezra Klein,
right? They all moved here, and the kind of deals they did with them to kind of build the right kind of shows and very premium, right? Nothing feels like it's a general show. I think it feels very premium.
Yeah.
So it's so much to learn and classily move to digital, not suddenly change who you are, but really find a great way to find a place for yourself online.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing about New York Times is they still are slightly lower than the price at which they IPO'd. So they're trading at slightly lower than the OG sort of issue price, and I think they IPO'd in 2004. Let me just double check, 2004, 2014, I'm forgetting. But I think, if you look at the landscape, right, New York Times had stiff competition from BuzzFeed, which you mentioned. BuzzFeed incidentally hired Ben Smith to launch their news division that they've now they're now at the cusp of killing news because it just hasn't taken off for them the way they expected it to. Remember Huffington Post? Everyone was all about that, HuffPo jam. Now no one gives a shit about what HuffPo is. I literally don't even see it come up, on Facebook or Twitter or anywhere else. A Wall Street Journal, which has managed to stay relevant, is of course still there. And obviously you've got the Washington Post that Jeff Bezos bought, and it's obviously run independently. But I think the great thing about New York Times is, there was a time when journalists used to scoff at social media, right? Where they'd say, yuck, we're too cool to be on Instagram, or we don't do Twitter, people come to us. I think they took the bouginess out of the way publishing was looked at without taking the bouginess out of their content. So when you think New York Times, you still think premium, you still think well thought out, well articulated, well researched content. But I think the great thing that they've done is they've gone to users where users are. Their Instagram is great. And not just that, Instagram for New York Times' fashion is great. They have another publication called Tea Magazine, which is phenomenal. NYT Cooking is known for their, excellent recipes. So really, really embraced going where consumers are, instead of assuming that, by being uppity and, highbrow, consumers are still going to continue coming to you.
And they also didn't let Google and the overall social media space kind of take over their articles through search, where it actually became something that they still owned. Because a lot of publications kind of died because of that, right? They saw that, okay, I can get more reach by really doubling down on using social media to put the content out. Here they're setting the context right, they're promoting it right, but you still have to go through the New York Times experience to really get all the content.
Yeah.
And I know that's a bit of a risk which they took, but it's really paid off. And it's, if everybody else took the other route, it's not worked really well, right? You cannot only be reliant on social media for people to consume your content. To find your content is where you need to use it, and they really have managed that really well.
Yeah. So just a quick clarification, ladies and gents. NYT, the publisher, went public on January 14th, 1969, so much earlier than the date I gave. And they were trading at $52 a share on the American Stock Exchange back then. I think right now they're a little lower than that, so they still haven't recovered to that. But I think the other thing that I want to sort of call out to over here is, if you look at their style of reporting also, to the point that you made earlier, they've stayed away from quote unquote breaking news, but they've gone deep into reporting, right? Exactly. So, for example, like Trump's financial misdeeds and misdoings was, I think a 1.5 year long research project for them, which then, came out as this like giant report sort of published exclusively on New York Times. I don't know if you've seen their like tech stack, but they have created these really cool immersive landing pages where even the way you consume news is super, like they have these very interactive, almost like gamified pages. But they did this excellent thing on climate change where, literally like there was this whole 3D thingamajig going on. But I think a lot of companies can learn a lot from the New York Times. The New York Times can embrace wanting to be relevant, as can many others.
Yeah.
Without going down the Arnab Goswami route.
And actually, a while back, I'd had Faye D'Souza on Advertising is Dead, and what she'd said, I think it was last December, if I remember right. And she'd actually said that the whole point is, if you go deeper, you might spend more time coming up with those reports, but people actually really appreciate the fact that there is depth to it. And the more you do that, you build yourself like a content company and not like a news company.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference here. New York Times at some point realized they need to work like a content company, which is building IP that people will come after, just in the way they do their opinion pieces, how they do their articles. So I think it's that, like, just a framework kind of evolved from, okay, what's the news today? So what can we kind of work on for the next 2 months to really get a great story at the end of that? That's really the mindset shift they've really focused on. Speaking of mindset shift, are you a CitiBank customer, Suchita? Are you a CitiBank customer?
No, I am not, but I'm an AxisBank customer.
Damn it. I bank with CitiBank, and I've been wondering for a while who's going to take over one of my loans. And it turns out Axis is going to take it over, and which is an interesting play right now that's happening in this space, because obviously there's the OG, which is HDFC, which is pretty much everywhere in the country. They are the biggest in that sense. But you had Kotak kind of come in and take over this whole mantle of really premiumizing and kind of like changing how consumer banking happened in the country. And then you had a lot of others, right? Obviously, Axis is a strong player. You also have IDBI Bank and a bunch of others there as well. I'm not even going towards Yes Bank and some of and ICICI who have had their own share of issues on that front. But when Citibank said they're going to move out of the country, what Citibank's always had is a set of really what is considered premium consumers, right? Because, you get people who are in MNCs, because a lot of multinationals came to India. The employee accounts were all Citibank. And like the same way how HSBC has now got a very focused audience in that sense. But Citibank actually scaled. They had great products from home loans and a few others, but they're moving out. The weird part is their move out has been so bizarrely managed, is that they could have gotten every bank to bid, but they eventually only got 2 bids, which was Axis and the other was Kotak. Everyone assumed Kotak would get it because it kind of made sense, similar in terms of just like the premiumness of the brand. But Axis has kind of come in and taken this out. But the most interesting part, which I think is a great thing to look at, is that while Kotak bid, I think, $1 billion for it, and Axis came in 1.6 billion, which almost feels like, why did they bid so much more? There is a tiny clause in the contract which says within 6 months, if the Citibank consumers choose to leave and move to another bank, the amount of money goes down. So if I'm a Citibank customer and I don't want to go to Axis, which I, for instance, might not, then they might just not get the 1.6. Maybe they'll even get lower than the one that Kotak was giving them. So what do you think of all of this? Money matters, bank matters.
So I think one, that Axis bid on this and maybe over-indexed on the bid and therefore has that clause sort of roped in my opinion, 2000% makes sense because I think Axis needs Citibank more than Kotak does. That's my very plebeian analysis on this, given I don't follow the banking sector or segment, at all, and I actually really should. So I think one, Axis definitely needs this more than, Kotak does. This also gives Axis an opportunity to, step up the ladder, right? I think they're the number 3, number 4 bank, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully this gives them that opportunity to sort of level up a little bit more than they have been able to now. But obviously to the point that even you've made in the past, the acquisitions are easy, right? But that merger happening, like you said, customers really choosing to stick around. I am, and this is no way an endorsement of Axis, but I've generally been a pretty happy consumer. To be fair, I'm also the world's easiest consumer to manage because I don't, have any crazy requirements. I pay my bills on time and all of that, don't have any loans in my name. But basically, my experience of Axis has been good. But obviously, the thing that will start mattering now is for that premium customer who's used to a concierge-esque service. Will Axis be able to live up? Because that's what's missing for a slightly more premium consumer in India, right? I used to bank with HDFC in the past, and not to throw them under the bus, but a total disaster. And
they're actually the most basic option. They're great for the basic stuff, but you want to go even one step ahead. They've always I remember way back in the day, even when as a business we were looking for a bank, we were always HDFC first, but we moved to Kotak at one point in time at Glitch because Kotak just gave us a better experience. Their dashboard was a lot more premium and a lot more easy to use. So I think that it's the UI, right? I think banking often has suffered from really bad user experience. Considering we all come from the days of passbooks. Did you have a passbook back in the day?
Yep. I am that old now. I remember passbooks. Aging, catching up to your 40 years.
But I think Citibank's story also, there's something to think about here because obviously they moved out of consumer banking in about 13 markets, right, across Asia and EMEA. EMEA. And I think what you should think about is some of these global banks have not been able to adapt to the modern scenario. You always heard of Citibank and HSBC and some of others, but now in every market you will see a local bank that's really up their game in that sense. And I think that's happening more and more across the board. So it might also be an interesting time to kind of look at some of these banks and seeing how are they evolving to stay relevant in certain markets and not just do cut, copy, paste everywhere else. And that's one part of the problem. But also how do some of our, let's say, kind of an Indian bank really truly go global? I've been a huge Kotak supporter for a while because I've just generally had one of my best experiences from a banking perspective with them. So yes, and I also think Uday Kotak is one of the smartest people ever. He's another level of smart. Which is why he only bid one. He didn't go beyond that. He's like, no, it's okay, keep it. Or did he just up that bid by going up to one, thinking that Axis will anyway go higher? You never know.
You take it, Axis. It's yours. But now that Varun has successfully made EMEA sound like an STD, guys, let's quickly pivot into another merger that's... tis the season of mergers, ladies and gents. Tis the season of mergers. So obviously news broke that the Pvr Inox merger is happening and Mr. Ajay Bijli will be the MD of the combined entity. So guys, in case you missed it, the combined entity will have a screen share of 50% in the multiplex industry, and Pvr Inox will together command a box office share of about 42% for Hindi and English content. Varun, you have an interesting story. Some crazy serendipitous things happened when this was announced. Tell us.
A really bizarre thing happened where we go to watch the Batman in a PVR near my house, and while we were in the theater, the merger got announced. But how I got to know about the merger was basically midway through the movie, which is generally dark anyway. The lights go off, a screen goes off, and you're wondering, is this part of the movie? And then 5 minutes, it's still dark, nothing's happened on screen. People are murmuring, phones are coming on, and suddenly this one guy comes up and the lights come on and saying, sorry, our server's gone down. And I pick up my phone, and half an hour before that is when the merger was announced. So merger is announced, server is down, like the movie is not running, right? And we're all sitting saying, okay, what's going on? 20 minutes in, the movie starts again, gets over, we come out, and there's a jam in the PVR that's next to this PVR. There are two PVRs next to each other near where I live. And the cars aren't able to exit because the exit gate is malfunctioning. So it wasn't opening. So I'm like, what is this merger announcement? Everything has shut down. Like cars can't get out, movies aren't running.
It's a sign.
I don't know if this is a sign. I think, but the good part for me at least is that the theater was full because full capacity is on again. People are going to go watch movies in theaters. And I went to watch Batman. RRR was running full, is still running. People are going nuts about that movie. I really want to go watch it in theater as well. Guiltiness in me is going like, yeah, Rajamouli's back. But I think people will go in, but I think it makes sense from a business standpoint for Inox and PVR to merge. I don't know if this just makes all the other players too tiny. Is this almost is this like from a market share standpoint, is this like too much is my only question here, because who is the other player? Cinepolis I think is pretty small,
too small.
And who else? I can't think of anybody big beyond these two.
So the rest is really like local in nature, or that's how it ends up being. I think what's obviously interesting about this news is, it's coming at the heels of like 2 horrible years of COVID, which obviously were like extremely unpleasant for these guys. On one of our past episodes, ladies and gents, we spoke about how PVR had launched Pristine Care, which was their home cleaning,
which is, by the way,
sort of service.
They ran 4 times before the movie started. They ran that ad 4 times, God. Pristine Care. So I saw it 4 times. Yeah.
Lovely. Was the hall clean, by the way? Did Pristine come to use?
It was clean. People did not seem as clean, some of them, especially the guy in front of me. But otherwise, it was pretty clean.
Yeah. So I think, obviously the past 2 years have been tumultuous for all theatre goers. I think the thing that's obviously very intrinsic and innate specifically in the Indian context is a theatre is a way of entertainment, right? It's your way of spending time with your family. Going to watch a movie isn't just about the movie. It's about all the frills that it comes along with, right? It's also a pretty cheap and affordable way to, take your family out and have a good time. Yeah. So I think obviously what is heartening to hear, I haven't entered a movie hall in I think 3-4 years now, but what's heartening to hear is that they've packed up. And what's obviously great to hear is that, people are looking at your theaters and movie halls as a way to find entertainment, yet again. But I think this, decision to merge has obviously come at the heels of 2 pretty shitty years for anyone, in this space. But obviously the biggest ROI of a move like this is, just the amount of monopolization that these two can together do, right? So negotiate better rentals, negotiate better terms with, producers of movies, optimize for your marketing spends, your sourcing costs, just all of those P&L line items that end up becoming, fat can tremendously improve, through this merger.
And I think what's also going to be interesting is I don't think this changes the game with the fact that a lot of movies will still go to streaming straight. But what it will actually do is that in many ways, it will give them, like you said, more bargaining power to say, obviously we have a larger section of this. So you have to do a deal with us to kind of be everywhere. So I think this is also a way for them to kind of say, okay, how do we build some form of strength for ourselves against streaming? And this might be a certain way to go.
So I have a quick question for you here, last one on this segment, which is, what do you think is the difference in between movies that will be shown in theaters, or let me rephrase it, movies that will drive ROI for theaters and movies which, will continue to be OTT experiences? Like, what do you think will end up being the difference in between the two?
Largely, it's going to be, is the movie an experience for you in the theater? A large number
of people. Like I wonder how 83 did for Hotstar. Or even Netflix for that matter.
So I think 83 was unfortunate. I think it's a great movie.
Movie.
It just got like Omicron really kind of screwed it over. But it's fabulous just to watch. And that's the one thing which I feel really bad about. Like one of those really good movies that just like timing was just so off in terms of what just happened with it.
Yeah.
But an 83, an RRR, a Batman on the other end, some of these will make sense to kind of go to a theater. But what we also need to consider is still a large part of the country that, like you said, right, the way for a family outing is to kind of go out to a theater. So a lot of like anything which is like a family-ish movie, we have a family movie category anyway. will end up being something you go to a theater for. But I think the window has anyway gone down so much now between coming to a theater to going out. Sometimes people might just say, okay, let me just put it in a theater for like a week and then from there on, or then just go to streaming straight, or like a couple of weeks in that sense. Sorry if you can hear my dog barking in the background. This is what she does for food. Lulu needs food.
Lulu is well trained by Varun, but Varun needs to take a break, correct?
Yes, we need to take a break to check why Lulu's food is taking so long. She won't stop barking till she gets food, by the way, guys. You should know this.
She has got food. She has stopped barking.
She's got food. She's stopped barking now. So we have something around biryani and evil eyes coming right after this break. So wait for it. We'll be right back with Think Fast.
If you're a cricket fan, check out Edges and Sledges, India's favorite cricket podcast.
The podcast focuses on Indian cricket, the IPL, and has a ton of banter both on and off the field.
We talk about the week's biggest cricket stories with current and ex-international cricketers, coaches, or sometimes just between us.
And it's hosted by me, DJ.
Me, Varun.
And me, Ashwin.
New episodes release every week.
You can catch us on the IVM Podcast's website, app,
or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast.
Welcome back to Think Fast. Do you buy jewelry, Suchita? Do you buy yourself some pendants from time to time?
I don't. And I'm just saying this to with your story.
Have you bought an evil eye pendant for yourself?
No, because I have brains.
Have you eaten biryani recently?
No, I haven't, because the rice gives me gas.
What? You don't eat biryani?
Screwing with you at this point. It's so much fun. I am like destroying your lead. But in any case,
let me figure out if you actually like biryani or not. Because I have an issue with people who don't like biryani. I have a genuine issue.
You will have an issue with me. I like quinoa kathal biryani, if that counts.
See, that's not biryani. That's like,
yeah,
what is
but
quinoa?
I mean, to be fair, and let's not bore our listeners with my gas issues, but I have this lovely thing called IBS, and pudin hara is what I end up consuming en masse.
Is that because you speak a lot of BS? It's like IBS.
Oh my God, Varun, just get to your story, dude. Focus.
IBS. I'm going to use that now. Like, guys, I have IBS because IBS. As in bullshit.
And your friends will slap you, just like
Will
Smith
slap me all the time. But getting to my story, there's been a few interesting launches from a creator brand perspective in recent times. Right? There was just this announcement that Zakir Khan is collaborating with Big Spoon, the cloud kitchen startup, to launch his own biryani. It's called Mayfield Biryani. It's a very Zakir Khan name to have. It is really I'd say very Zakir-esque ad to sell it, which is very desi, very Lucknow in that sense. So the interesting part here is this is happening at a point of time when a lot of creators are trying to launch brands. And on the other end of the spectrum, Ekta Kapoor's brand, which you spoke about, I think a few weeks, if not a month or ago, which is World of EK, has also been doing really well, built on one. And while a lot of the stuff sells, one of the prime sellers is this one pendant, which is an evil eye pendant, which is doing really well. It literally is the first thing that pops up when you go onto the site and you check it. So what do you think of this entire space? I mean, I have a bunch of points of view, but I know that you have too. So let's start off getting your points of view on Zakir's biryani and EK's evil pendant. Evil eye pendant.
So actually, in all honesty, yes, I have bought evil eye pendants in the past. But from LBB, not House of EK. It's just one of those, actually, I end up making a lot of purchases just to see quality of products and, what's being sold and what people are consuming. But this evil eye is a massive trend. Like, it was a massive trend 2 years ago. It's back in fad and back in business. And you've got everything from...
Is it because that emoji is being used a lot more? I have realized people use the evil eye emoji so much in recent times.
I don't know where. So 2 years ago, it came from this, I guess the way it now works is, you see these things pop up on Instagram and social media. And the next thing, everyone else wants to sort of, jump on the bandwagon. Also, maybe it's people hoping that COVID doesn't come back anytime soon. So, ward off all that's around you. So apart from me troubling Varun, guys, yes, I am, one of those evil eye shoppers, not from a house of World of Ek. And incidentally, when Tanmay Bhatt was on my other podcast, Open House last year, he actually, I remember we guys were talking about Mr. Beast burgers. And the first thing he said was, I've been telling Zakir, why can't he launch a biryani brand? And he should totally do what, Mr. Beast has done. So Zakir Khan's about a year and a half late on the creator to food space mix, but it's good to see stuff like this happen. And I think even if for worst case scenario this shit doesn't work out, I just think it's really important for more creators to see larger creators try, and that someone in the general league of Ekta Kapoor is saying, if I can do this, my sort of challenge to more creators would be, why don't you test out ways in which you can productize things that tie in with, what you're talking about and what you're creating, and productize it and give it to consumers. So I think generally, irrespective of where this goes, it's a very good trend, and it's great to see large creators, celebrities almost, take this up much more seriously.
I think the interesting part about both of these is that they seem like perfect fits. Like the Mr. Beast burger, like the burgers, and if you actually dig into the story of how each of those burgers are, it's very on brand to Mr. Beast. They just in terms of taste, just in terms of packaging, everything else feels like a very Mr. Beast kind of a thing to do. Same here at Zakir talks about biryani so much. He's one of those people I know who's obsessed with biryani more than many people I have met. So for him to do biryani and to also partner, right? I feel Big Spoon has done this also very smartly. If you think about it, they could have very easily just gotten Zakir on as a brand ambassador, done some marketing around it, pushed it out. But to make it almost his biryani brand and them being really the backbone to this, kind of lets them take on the kitchen and the operational piece over there, and he really kind of helps build the brand. Super smart way to do it. Ekta Kapoor as well, she's partnered with Proposo, rather, to kind of push this whole thing out through their platform. So they've been building a bunch of other pieces out. I know that Nick, as in Nikunj Lotia, also launched his brand sometime back, and this kind of came out around the same time. But for her as well, like the Decor and Evil Eye space is literally what you would see across the sets of all her shows and everything else. It's very on brand. And I think that's the trick. You need to find something that feels so connected to your narrative as a creator or as a celebrity. Shouldn't seem random. Yeah. Like maybe I should sell a toilet brush. Is that my on brand? What is on brand for me? Let me ask you this question. What is on brand for me?
Hair. Bona meds, bro. Bona fucking meds.
I actually have a great brand to suggest for it, but I'll only talk about it in the end. So I have just bought myself, and this is my age talking, I have bought myself a spine cushion for me to sit on when I work. It's that one cushion you put on your chair where it basically protects your spine.
We all know
what
a spine cushion is.
As my age is going ahead, I am wearing a spine cushion. I will start my own range of spine cushions with polka dots.
You do that. But while you work on that, I think a couple of things that I want to add to this particular point, right, especially in the context of Zakir's biryani thingamajig. I was, pulling out a couple of numbers. This is from an article dated March 12th, 2021. So, ladies and gents, about a year ago, Mr. Beast had sold his first 1 million burgers in record time. So the brand opened on December 19th, 2020. And literally in a matter of 3 months, he hit about 1 million burgers, which is about 12,000 burgers a day. And it's not like his burgers were cheap, right? They were generally in the range of $6.99 to $8.99, dollars. They, I think, had created cloud kitchens across 300 locations in the US. At least that's what they were projecting, it out to be. So I think one is, this stuff is not small scale. It's not like, someone like a Mr. Beast, who, for those who are uninitiated, is a massive YouTube creator based out of the US. We spoke about his Squid Games set a couple of, in one of our first couple of episodes. So I think one's that. And I think the second thing which I really like about these partnerships with House of Ek and with Zakir Khan is they are not taking on the liability of operations on themselves, which I think is the biggest stupidity that a lot of creators make, where everything becomes very like hand to mouth / small mom and pop shop run, right? And what ends up happening over there is then creators get distracted. They're not really able to focus on the thing that they're good at, which is, using their audiences to drive more top of funnel and then converting parts of those to buyers and purchasers of their product. So I think the good things done over here is they've kept management and operations almost like external to what their capabilities are. It seems like they're focusing on their capabilities, which is creating that intent, with consumers through their content, and then letting the professionals handle the thing that the professionals are good at. So just wanted to add that there.
No, it makes total sense. And I think that's almost like some of those pointers to take for any creator looking to start out. Find the best partner who can actually run the business operations. and you focus on building the brand, because one thing creators are great at is to kind of build a brand around something, which especially in today's day and time. So yeah, I think that's the best way to kind of make it work. But what do you have next, considering not
so
apart from telling me I need monomeds?
And talking about my gas. Basically...
Amazing episode today.
Guys, now that you and...
Don't mix monomeds and gas.
Oh my God, that would be a disaster. But in any case, switching over, we spoke about how this is the season of acquisitions. This is also the season of collaborations, ladies and gents. And, we've got, I'm going to quickly run through a couple of collabs that have been happening in international markets. So obviously what caught news cycles in the past 7 to 8 odd days was that massive Omega and Swatch collaboration. So in a revolutionary
I thought it's an
move,
April Fool's joke, by the way. I think I'm just been in this phase of like April Fool's
jokes, and nothing has turned out to be an April Fool's joke, including the Zomato 10-minute delivery. But circling back to Omega and Swatch, so in a revolutionary move, Omega and Swatch launched a line of 11 planetary themed watches with distinct colors at approximately 20,000 rupees per watch. The collaboration was based on the iconic Omega Speedmaster chronograph, which traveled to the moon over 50 years ago. Whatever, I'm not going to bore you guys with stuff that you can Google. But basically, this Omega Swatch collaboration was massive because they sold out in record time. For those of you who've generally been looking at high snobby, whatever. But if you guys have generally been consuming more like high street news, each of the stores was packed to the rafters. I think there was like a waiting of some 1,000, 2,000 people outside of their UK store. So this really created ripples, all over the internet. And suddenly, Omega sort of broke into mainstream news cycles, as did Swatch, which, kind of like, at least for me, had faded into oblivion, especially over the past year. So, one was that. And the price point, right? I am not a watch connoisseur by any barometer, but that price point of $260 to own, Omega was
20
obviously,
grand.
Exactly, was unheard of in the context of folks who are obsessed with
watches. Just for context, a Speedmaster, if you go buy right now on the regular one, I think it's upwards of 5 lakhs. I think 5-6 lakhs. What it comes to. I went and checked.
Not the one on Meesho. The one on Meesho is for 500 rupees, guys. In case you're looking for something.
That might not be an Omega. That is an Omega.
Omega. No, but this collaboration was huge. Did you see it on your feed? It was like all over my like international handles.
It was literally a bunch of people sharing it, saying, I want. That is what is happening everywhere.
And I think that's a great thing about these collabs, right? Like items that you didn't even give a shit about suddenly become these like, coveted, like must-have, must-sees, must-dos, and they really break these brands into that limelight.
But there's something about watches that has been an interesting trend. And when this got announced, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole and tried to learn more about what's happening in the watch space. The same way how people are collecting sneakers. There's this entire movement of collecting watches. While everybody moved towards smartwatches and like, Apple Watches, all your noise and everybody else in India, for instance, like Boat. But people are really collecting these. And for instance, the Speedmaster has really come back in because like even the recent Ryan Reynolds movie on Netflix, he's wearing a Speedmaster in it. There was an entire article on that. And similarly, there's what LeBron James wears becomes a thing. I think I forget what it's called, but it's gold one which has the date. I think it's called the Date Master, if I'm not wrong. So some of these have gotten connected to pop culture as well, because all your actors, sports people, etc., wearing them. You'll also see like what watches Hardik Pandya wearing. Hardik Pandya wears some really expensive, like 10-20 lakh watches. So it's become a thing to collect, the same way collecting sneakers. So when something like this comes up, it becomes a great collector's edition to have, and not just one of those like, because if it is a regular Swatch, maybe you wouldn't buy it. But because it's a collab, it becomes something you want to kind of keep. And with watches like these, you can pass them on through generations.
Yep. And not just Omega and Swatch, right? There's a very popular brand based out of Copenhagen called Ganni, which is, like I love the brand because it operates in that like, nice, sustainable sort of space. And their designs are very like cool and like Copenhagen-ish. They are working on a exclusive collection with Juicy Couture. Like remember those really tacky velvet track pants that every like South Delhi auntie... Correct. Yes. So that is making
New Balance shoes and juicy tracksuit.
But speaking of which, I think New Balance has also done a very, very good job of their collabs. They collaborated with a brand called Stored, which is a very like hip, American brand. And they launched a set of absolutely gorgeous New Balance shoes in partnership with Stored. But I think the great thing about this is, like Juicy Couture broke into mainstream when Paris Hilton would wear their velour, track pants all across the simple life. And then Kim Kardashian wore it. And this is like back when I was a kid, right? So your early 2010s, late 2000s, early 2010s almost. But, Ganni and Juicy's collab again is set to be another big home run. Obviously, Adidas and Gucci had a collab recently, which was this year's biggest fashion team-ups, so far. I think their collection, sold out very quickly. Obviously, in your larger news cycles, you've got Easy and Gap. Birkenstocks has been collaborating left, right, and center. Their more recent collaboration being with Manolo Blahnik. So it's almost like there's this like fashion resurrection, especially post-COVID and a year of like slumpy sales. And I think the cool thing that's happening over here is it's brands of a certain price point. Like you're not seeing, too much masstige collaborations happening. They're typically happening in that, premium to luxury kind of segment.
Yeah, I think also interesting here is that, like I spoke about the collector's piece earlier, but these become great ways to do, I think the drop culture of things, which was generally, at some point, like a Supreme started and went from there. It's great to do some of these. People want to own them. People don't necessarily want to wear what everybody else is wearing. So these make it very interesting for people to kind of own. It's great for Instagram, I guess.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. But I think more than anything else, what is good over here is the fact that the combinations really work. There is a sync there. Either there's surprise, but at some point it needs to kind of make sense. And I think that's really the big takeaway, that if you are doing a collab as a brand, you got to figure a way to make sure it kind of fits and there is a certain story to that fit.
Yeah. And in the Indian context, I mean, if you look at the H&M and Sabya collab, right, which obviously got a lot of like hate because H&M stands to some extent the opposite of what Sabyasachi stands for, which is craftsmanship. Yeah. And H&M is obviously notorious for poor wages, poor treatment of labor and the opposite of craftsmanship. But for example, even that, they sold out in 2 minutes. Like that's how quickly that launch sold out. So this, I think, is here to stay. I think this, sort of segment of mid to luxe collaborations is going to continue.
And having less is always a good thing. If you are going to do something like this, the fact that there is less inventory is actually one of the best things you can do for yourself. You make people wanting for more. So you could always do more collabs. You are not just it's fine, I'll just buy it later. You have to buy it now because it might just run out. And that's the biggest thing that sells.
And I think one last thing I want to add over here before we get to your last story is look at the economy that's been created around this, right? So for example, sneakers and collectibles within sneakers grew because there's this whole ecosystem of StockX, the Real, and like 20 other reseller platforms that were, coming up. So I think what's really interesting is all of these are becoming ecosystem plays where, you're suddenly seeing these drops being sold on like eBay and other reseller sites at like, 3, 4, 5x the amount that they were originally sold for. So it's in these ecosystems where, value creation is happening and hence collectibles. And I wonder what all this will look like as NFTs. Like all of this is going to come together in spectacular ways. But over to you. What
I want to talk about, I know we've spoken about Reliance a few times, especially in the fashion context that we spoke about last week, just in terms of their acquisitions in the innerwear space. But if you take a broader look, and I thought that'd be a good thing to talk about, is that Reliance has taken a bit of an interesting way to grow in the fashion, and they didn't go full mass as their primary focus. Obviously, Reliance Brands for the longest time is obviously the country's largest player in the luxury partnership space, right? So everything from Armani to Burberry to even Diesel came into India and a lot of others, all partners with Reliance to kind of come in here. They've just been on a bit of an acquisition spree, getting homegrown brands in recent times, right? Abraham and Takore, if I pronounce
Thakur, Abraham and Thakur.
Chakor. Abraham and Chakor.
Oh my God.
Chakor. That's a Chakore. Abraham and Chakore.
This is amazing.
This is how Bombay says it, and that's how Delhi says it, okay? But so David Abraham and Rakesh Thakur, obviously founded Payback. So they've acquired a majority stake in that a while back. If you remember, they acquired Hamleys as well. And kind of taken over that entire
part. That was like an old acquisition.
Yeah, about 2019. By the way, it's only 2019. It's old. It feels like before. It's before
shit.
times.
Oh, wow. Abhi.
As in before times, before world got turned upside down, which is why it feels like it was a long time ago.
Long time ago, yeah.
Ritu Kumar, Anamika Khanna. There's been so much happening, even like the whole Rahul Mishra, JV. So one is to kind of take over this extreme luxury and also like homegrown, like the designer-esque brands. Yeah. On the other end, take up niche categories like innerwear, which obviously have a lot of scale, but they feel very niche. What do you think of this?
Innerwear is not niche.
As in, it's not necessarily top of mind. Like, when you think of fashion, you're thinking stuff that's fast fashion.
It is actually literally top of mind, bro. Innerwear is like the most obvious bet to make.
Okay, let me kind of rephrase that then. Maybe not niche, but it's not what you start fashion with. You start fashion with, for a lot of people, you would start off, okay, let's sell fast fashion, let's do that category.
I agree. Yeah. It's like a subcategory at a Marks and Spencer.
Exactly.
Or H&M or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, although you do go to Marks and Spencer to only buy innerwear because they have amazing innerwear. But yes, what do you think of this way of going about, like either finding specific categories, going deep, or going premium luxury where obviously the value is much higher?
So, this acquisition / whatever it was, majority buyout, this, that or the other. Yeah, I think this kind of confused me because, see, like the Rahul Mishra, Anamika Khanna, etc., I get, because wedding wear in India is a massive opportunity, right? So you're like luxury wedding wear, I get that segment. And that's a tried, tested segment. You've seen how well Raw Mango, Sabyasachi, all these guys have done. So that I get. As someone who, obviously has seen Abram and Thakur's stores and their clothes, and obviously someone who knows how to pronounce their names correctly.
Thakur.
I think the one thing over here is their clothes are very modern, right? Like they use a lot of like Indian textiles, but their silhouettes are very like modern, and that has historically not really worked in India. Like you've seen, or at least the scale hasn't come from there, from a B2C sort of, a sales point. So I totally get the acquisitions in like, high-end luxury wedding wear. 100% aligned with that. But why would you acquire small, player who's in basically this like convoluted category of high-end Indian fusion? So I think what I'm interested to see is what do they do with the brand? Because don't get me wrong, Abram and Thakur's clothes are splendid, right? Like exquisite tailoring, exquisite fits. But it's very like,
modern.
Which has just not worked in India. And again, I don't know what their revenues in this or the other is.
This is more saying this is a category we don't have any play in. Let's see how it goes, and maybe add a bit of the Reliance plug-in to kind of see if we can scale it out.
Correct. Yeah, and improve their product development, maybe, make their like aesthetic. So for example, like AMPM, for instance, has done very well. So, can they work with the Abram and Thakur sort of like team to, switch them into the AMPM sort of, look? All of those things could be fairly interesting, but I was pleasantly surprised, and I'm interested to see how the jugalbandi of both of them comes together to create something, interesting for Indian consumers, which is also scalable and isn't as niche as Abram and Thakur, at least to me seems, without knowing too much about their numbers.
What I think is also interesting is if you look at Reliance and how they look at specific industries and how they'll scale within those, I think there's literally like different playbooks for people to kind of look at, saying how did they do it. Obviously, there's a large amount of less money push kind of coming in to be able to build scale, but it's also this a clear strategy from what you can see is that, look at fashion, they looked at luxury, they looked at innerwear, and now they kind of
see very holistic.
Exactly, it makes sense, but also it's not a cut copy paste of what, let's say, everybody else has done. Right? No, they didn't go, although they do have, let's say, fast fashion base level stuff, but this seems to be a constant focus where a lot of other, I would say, conglomerates haven't done that. So I think there's something to learn here from a playbook perspective as well.
Yep. And with that, a break.
With that, we are done for this episode. But we have recommendations. Oh, I gave my recommendation earlier, but we will give my I'll talk about my bum cushion right after the break again, because I love talking about my bum cushion. I love it. I want to give it a name. Maybe we'll come with a name for my bum cushion after the break. But we can take a break right now. I'll be right back with me and my bum cushion. Oh, sorry, with you as well.
Oh my God.
Habits? Routines? How exactly do they help us get better? Well, to simplify it for you, tune in to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashton Doctor, and I'm going to be here to help you get better daily with some simple, easy to do habits that you can easily adapt to your life. So tune in to the Habit Coach podcast from Monday to Friday because I believe that awesome lives start with awesome habits.
Okay, welcome back to us talking about gas and biryani and bum cushions.
We are aging, listeners. We are aging.
This is suddenly gone from this is gone Geriatrics Anonymous. It's become from
seriously
from think
absolutely
fast. Think fast up. No, that's not. What is the type? Think Hajmola. But
think Hajmola. Yes.
I love Hajmola. It's so yummy.
Okay, but, focus, Varun, focus.
What is your recommendations? What are recommendations of this week?
My recommendations are, if you actually have gas issues, Nexium is a great medicine to pop immediately. But keeping that aside, I think I have like a not recommendation, which is please don't waste your life on Bridgerton season 2. It is so bad. It's not even funny.
I'm hearing conflicting points. Some people love it. Some people hate it. But I think that's always a good thing for a show.
Oh my God, it's atrocious. I did not enjoy it at all. Yeah. But I think if I had to, recommend something, especially for those of you who thoroughly enjoy all things like, pop culture, there's this really cool new podcast launched by Dua Lipa. Speaking of creators going into creating outside of their, core domain expertise. So in case you guys don't know, Dua Lipa is a super popular singer. I'm sure you've heard all of her songs a bajillion times. She's actually launched a publication called At Your Service, and she has a podcast called At Your Service, where she's like interviewed a bunch of really cool folks. So she spoke with Russell Brand, she spoke with Elton John, and she's like designed the episode in really interesting ways. So long story short, check out Dua Lipa's At Your Service, which is a publication and a podcast.
I actually found this really interesting Instagram account. I even met them when I was in Delhi. They called Project Bibliotherapy. They actually give some great books recommendations. They also gave me this really like fun booklet, which basically gives you books you can read with QR codes you can scan to actually buy them as well. Check them out on Instagram. They're really nice. Project Bibliotherapy. Some nice recos for book recommendations and stuff like that. Also like a fun bunch. They gave me this really bizarre, fun book, which is those old Ladybird books we used to get as kids. Yeah. This is they gave me a parody Ladybird book, which is about the dad. And it's basically like, it's really funny because it's made like an old Ladybird book, but it's just making fun of dads. Just perfect. That's the kind of stuff I like to read.
Yes. I will get that book and make fun of you in our next episode again.
Yes. And that's it from me on this episode. Also have always keep a lollipop on your desk. It's great to have. It's a nice...
Okay, Varun, we've done a really good job of staying under 1 hour. So let's stay under 1 hour and say bye to our listeners.
Bye, listeners. Toodles.
Bye,
see you next week, you guys. Have fun. Yeah. Have a nice weekend.
God, my ears hurt. Bye, Varun.
Hey, everybody. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On This Round is on Me, Gauri meets Meenu Margaret, founder and CEO of Bliss Club. They talk about how Meenu began to produce pocket-enriched activewear for women. On Big Talk About Tiny Humans, Devi Shobha and Meghna explain how one can prepare their kids for emergencies. This week on the Musafir Story, Saif and Faiza speak with Akshita Bhanjdeo, director of Belgaria Palace, an 18th century Victorian-era style palace that is now a boutique hotel in Mayurbhanj, Odisha. And on Audio Gyan, Kedar speaks to Kshitiz Anand about his Happy Horizons Trust and his community-based learning. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you might be listening to us on. And do check us out on YouTube. We're building a whole bunch of different channels. You can find them on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And we're also doing a small listener survey, which we would really appreciate your help with. It helps us kind of talk to advertisers. So you could go to ivmpodcast.com/survey. It'll just take a couple of minutes and it would be really helpful to us. We do appreciate this. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance and the India Water Portal. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.